Let's go out there and kick some butt, baby. Here we go, DO3, 1, 2, 3.
The most overlooked member of one of the most dominant linebacking cores of all time. An unsung hero. While Greg Lloyd and Kevin Greene were terrorizing quarterbacks, Levon Kirkland was running full speed into the first blocker that he could find, and he was totally okay with that.
I adapted, the role of, I don't care what I do, I'm just gonna play to win.
But clearing paths for his teammates was just the beginning of Kirkland's impact. Coming out of Clemson as a top outside linebacker, Levon Kirkland went inside and manned the middle like few others for over a decade in the NFL. Listed at a hulking 270 pounds, but likely playing even heavier than that for much of his career, Levon Kirkland was unsurprisingly a premier run stopper.
Goes about 270. He is a big linebacker, but he's really matured this year and is a really fine run stopper.
But his speed and agility in coverage is what made him so unique and so important to the famed Blitzburgh defense.
Levon Kirkland he's just a different kind of football player at his size. To be able to cover wide receivers and running backs like that, something else.
Kirkland was a hybrid linebacker in a defensive tackle's body and a driving force behind the elite Steelers defense of the 90s. But with so many stars on that defense, Kirkland's impact is rarely appreciated as it should be. But without Levon Kirkland, there is no Blitzburgh. Let's jog your memory. A South Carolina native, the future star defender would be on both sides of the ball in high school, playing linebacker and tight end for Lamar High School, and he was effective, receiving all-state recognition at both positions. And Kirkland didn't just play multiple positions, he played multiple sports, also leading the school's basketball team. But football is where he would garner some interest from some in-state D1 programs, ultimately committing to Clemson as a linebacker in January of 1987, a school which apparently only started to recruit him seriously to make sure that rival South Carolina wouldn't get him. Clemson had been a good team throughout the 80s, with defense being their strong point over the last couple of seasons. And with the freshman Kirkland impressing before the season even started, he looked to be a big contributor at some point. Except at just 190 pounds, the linebacker didn't look all that big, as Kirkland would end up redshirting his freshman year, finally taking the field during the 1988 season as one of the most intimidating special teams players on a 10-2 Clemson team who featured one of the nation's best defenses and defeated Oklahoma in the Citrus Bowl. Kirkland impressed in year one, but 89 would see him really start to make his mark as a bandit, showing not only an ability to disrupt the offense in the backfield, but also the finesse to drop back in coverage, playing a much larger role on a Clemson defense that was even better than last year, once again turning in a dominant 10-2 campaign, which included a win over West Virginia in the Gator Bowl. Clemson had a new head coach going into 1990 in Ken Hatfield, and fortunately for him, he inherited one of the nation's best linebacking cores, with Kirkland, John Johnson, Ed McDaniel, and Wayne Simmons, as the Kirkland-led Tigers defense only got better in 1990. Clemson allowed just 9 points per game and shut out 3 opponents, including Illinois in the Hall of Fame Bowl, en route to their third straight 10-2 season, as the Tigers' leading tackler Kirkland was now one of the top linebackers in the nation and would be both a first-team All-Conference member and a second-team All-American in 1990. Going into his final collegiate season, Kirkland was considered by some as the best outside linebacker in the country, a game-breaker who could ruin the opponent's entire game plan, as he led a Clemson defense who were once again among the nation's elite. Unfortunately, a 2-game winless stretch to unranked opponents early in the season all but ended their national championship hopes. And while they still won 9 games and captured the ACC title, their season ended on a sour note after a loss to Cal in the Citrus Bowl. But Kirkland would add consensus All-American to his resume, leaving Clemson with 40 tackles for loss, 19 sacks, and 4 interceptions, as the once skinny tight end was now one of the top linebacker prospects going into the 1992 NFL Draft. Kirkland was selected with the 10th pick of the second round by the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had just ended the long and fruitful Chuck Noll era, with the legendary coach retiring following the 91 season, and trying to fill his shoes would be a young Bill Cowher, completely overhauling the coaching staff. And with the Steelers wanting to run a zone blitz, it made a lot of sense to draft a multifaceted Kirkland. But with linebackers like David Little, Hardy Nickerson, and fan favorite Greg Lloyd on the roster, Kirkland had to earn his stripes, getting his first opportunities on special teams. Kirkland would play a minimal role on a Steelers defense, which would be one of the best in the league, leading the Steelers to an 11-5 record and their first division title since 1984. But an experienced Buffalo Bills team would end their season in the divisional, as Kirkland's rookie year, spent mostly on special teams, saw him record 5 total tackles. Kirkland hoped that he had shown enough to get himself on the field, ideally playing opposite of Greg Lloyd, but any chance of that went out the window in early August, when the Steelers signed former All-Pro and pass rush specialist Kevin Greene. But there were still positions to be filled in the linebacking core. David Little was aging, and Nickerson had left for Tampa, so the Steelers needed an inside linebacker. And if Levon Kirkland could go from tight end in high school to an outside linebacker in college, why couldn't he make another adjustment in the NFL? So Levon Kirkland would beat out Little for the starting strong side linebacker job in '93. But this wasn't a complete shot in the dark. Kirkland had played the position well in a couple All-Star games after his senior season. So once he truly learned the position, the sky was the limit, and Levon Kirkland was a quick learner, starting 13 of 16 games and showing his impact in more ways than one. Much like in college, Kirkland was a premier run stopper, as he hit hard and he hit smart, forcing a career-high 4 fumbles in year 2 and scoring the only touchdown of his career in a Week 6 win over San Diego.
And I really did not know exactly what I was doing. I was just like, just run to the ball. If anything, just run to the ball.
But even more impressive, listed at about 240 pounds coming out of college, Kirkland looked even bigger on the field now, yet he ran with the speed and stride of someone much smaller. As Kirkland would say, he had field speed. So Levon Kirkland was coming into his own, but still didn't get a ton of recognition on such a star-studded defense, with their new pass-rushing duo of Kevin Greene and Greg Lloyd. Then in the secondary, not only did the Steelers feature safety Carnell Lake, they also had the Defensive Player of the Year in cornerback Rod Woodson, all working together to return the Steelers to their elite defensive ways of decades past. And with one of the league's best rushing attacks, their offense wasn't too shabby either. But it was a streaky season for Pittsburgh. After winning 6 of their first 9, starting running back Barry Foster was lost for the season. And with some down play on the defensive side of the ball after that, Pittsburgh managed to win just 3 of their final 7, but Kirkland played no small part in those wins. And their final win over Cleveland in the season finale got them a return to the playoffs. However, while they would have a strong start to their wildcard matchup with Kansas City, the defense would give up 17 second-half points, as the Chiefs forced overtime, then ended Pittsburgh's year with a field goal. But Kirkland's first season as an inside linebacker saw him rack up 103 tackles, 4 forced fumbles, 1 sack, and a defensive touchdown. Pittsburgh had dealt with some defensive turnover in '93, but now the pieces were in place, and every quarterback in the league was put on notice in 1994. The Steelers' offense was again carried by their power running, with Barry Foster returning and splitting time with rookie Bam Morris, as the two combined for nearly 1,700 yards. But that's not why you came to see the Steelers in '94. Pittsburgh had their defensive personnel set, and just to give them a little more firepower, second-year linebacker Chad Brown would break out. So the Steelers had a dynamic defensive line and a do-it-all secondary, who would all get to the quarterback in the Steelers' zone blitz. But the stars of that show were the linebackers. The Steelers' defense as a whole racked up an NFL-leading and team record 55 sacks, and their starting linebackers accounted for over 35 of those. Yet Kirkland only had 3, but that's how he liked it.
Because I like it inside. I mean, you might not get the sacks, you might not get the club, but you get a lot of action. You have a lot of responsibilities, and I like that.
Levon Kirkland rarely got the glory, but he was arguably the most important linebacker, taking on blockers to free up a hole for someone else to get to the QB. And if the secondary was blitzing, the light-footed Kirkland proved to be more than just a big body in the middle, showing his exceptional coverage ability with each game, recording his first career interception in Week 7, then his second in Week 12, made even more noteworthy now that Kirkland was being listed at 260 pounds. But the rush was king in Pittsburgh. Quarterbacks never stood a chance. The sacks were high, the points were low, and the wins were plenty. Blitzburg was born. A sluggish start was nothing Pittsburgh couldn't overcome, and over their final 12 games, They lost just twice, at one point even winning 7 in a row, and capturing their second straight division title, after finishing the year at 12-4. The divisional round would bring division rival Cleveland, and Pittsburgh completely shut them down, holding the Browns to below 190 total yards and forcing 2 turnovers. And with a dominant rushing attack, the Steelers had put the game away by halftime and looked primed for a Super Bowl appearance as soon as they got through the underdog Chargers in the conference championship. With San Diego neutralizing the ground game, Pittsburgh had to rely on the pass, and it was working, but Pittsburgh just couldn't capitalize on drives, going into the fourth quarter with just 13 points. But fortunately, their defense up to that point had held San Diego to just 10, and Kirkland played a big part in that, with 9 total tackles in the game. But when San Diego took the lead in the final minutes, Pittsburgh had to capitalize on their final drive. But it didn't happen, as the team who many thought would win the Super Bowl wouldn't even make an appearance, as Kirkland ended his year with 100 total tackles, 3 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So the Steelers' defense was great, but now their coordinator was moving on. So a promotion was in order. But could their defense be even better? Well, first, Pittsburgh had to make sure they kept their defense. So in August, they agreed to terms with Kirkland. He'd be in the black and gold for another 4 years. And that coordinator promotion went to defensive backs coach Dick LeBeau, no stranger to the zone blitz. In fact, he had been the one to popularize it as the Bengals defensive coordinator in the 80s. Now the students were being taught by the master.
Coach LeBeau laid it out saying, hey, this is my baby. Now we're going to really run it the way it's supposed to be run.
You didn't know who was coming and who was dropping into coverage. Even the smartest quarterbacks were at Pittsburgh's mercy. And for Kirkland, this would be the season that he would decide what his identity would be among the defense.
And I felt like for myself, I was a guy that kind of did some of the dirty work as an inside linebacker. And I was just like, you know what? I just want to win.
Oh, except for Woodson blew out his knee in week 1. No problem. Carnell Lake shifted to corner and went to the Pro Bowl. And with the rest of the secondary carrying their weight, the Steelers had one of the top pass defenses. And they had an elite rush defense. Overall, not as dominant as last year, but they lost Woodson, so you gotta cut them some slack. But there was cause for concern. Coming out of the bye week, a loss to Cincinnati dropped Pittsburgh's record to 3-4. But like last year, the second half Steelers were a completely different team, and it really helped that they had a much more dynamic offense, with the addition of rookie Cordell Stewart and a career year from receiver Yancey Thigpen. Without Woodson, teams were more willing to pass on the Steelers, and with Kirkland now often taking on the blockers, his numbers dropped, but his impact remained the same, if not more. Still a premier hybrid linebacker, stopping the run and defending against the pass. And the Steelers, just like last year, they rattled off another 7-game win streak and took home another division title, setting up a home playoff game against a Buffalo Bills team who hadn't lost a conference playoff game since the 1989 season. Kirkland was active in this one with 7 total tackles, and although the Steelers held a 12-point lead with about 5 minutes left, it was far from over. But then an interception gave Pittsburgh a chance to ice it. Yet almost immediately, Buffalo had the ball back after an interception of their own, but on Jim Kelly's first throw of the following drive, Kirkland got it right back.
Levon Kirkland able to pick it off.
And this time, the Steelers scored. Game over. The AFC Championship brought the underdog Colts, and everyone at Three Rivers couldn't help but think the worst, as the Colts looked to come down with the improbable Hail Mary game winner on the final play. But when the dust settled, it was incomplete. Pittsburgh was heading to the Super Bowl. It was an old rivalry revived as the Steelers met the Cowboys in the big game. Somehow Rod Woodson had made it back, and Kirkland would play one of his best games, helping hold Emmitt Smith to below 50 rushing yards with a game-high 8 solo tackles, and getting into the sack column in very impressive fashion.
And once Coach LeBeau called that play, I was like, I'm about to make a big play. It's about to happen.
But 2 fourth-quarter interceptions thrown by Neil O'Donnell destroyed any hopes for a Steelers comeback, as the team left Arizona empty-handed, and Kirkland ended his season with 88 total tackles, 1 sack, and 2 fumble recoveries. Pittsburgh nearly made the Super Bowl in '94. In '95, they lost it, with a less than 100% Rod Woodson. Going into 1996, Woodson was now fully recovered. Oh, and they had a new running back, who fit the offense and the city perfectly. So as long as there's no disaster, 96 had to be Pittsburgh's year.
Looks like the left lower leg of Greg Lloyd, and when they put the air cast on and bring the cart out, that is nothing but a bad sign and bad news indeed.
Disaster strikes. Another crushing Week 1 injury, this time to Greg Lloyd, not only a top pass rusher, but also their best coverage linebacker. And still not mentioned is that Kevin Greene was also gone. But that's fine. Move Chad Brown to the outside, give third-year linebacker Jason Gilden the starting spot on the other side, and problem solved. And the loss of Lloyd in the pass defense, Kirkland would worry about that.
I don't think there was really any hesitation when Greg went down that who the guy would be.
Kirkland was given his most responsibility to date in 1996, putting up then career highs in many categories. 113 tackles, 4 sacks, and then there was the most impressive stat, a career high 4 interceptions.
It is picked off by Levon Kirkland. Willie Mays would have been proud of that catch. Talk about over the shoulder. I told you how big he is.
Add in a couple forced fumbles, and you had a Pro Bowl and second-team All-Pro season from Kirkland. And the Steelers didn't miss a beat, recording 50 sacks, forcing a lot of turnovers, and allowing just 16 points per game. Then with a physical run game led by the bus, Pittsburgh was right back in business. After a Week 1 loss, Pittsburgh won their next 5, with Kirkland recording 2 sacks and a forced fumble in that 5th win over the Bengals. However, the Steelers couldn't keep this pace all season, hovering around 500 over their remaining 10 games, and stumbling down the stretch as they ended the regular season with 2 straight losses. But their hot start was enough of a cushion to give them a 10-win season and another division title, as well as a rematch with the Indianapolis Colts. The first half was close, as the Steelers went into the break up by just 3 points. But when the third quarter started, the Steelers defense turned it up 10 notches, holding the Colts to just 22 second-half yards. And Kirkland would continue his career year with another interception, as the Steelers turned it into a laugher and were on to a divisional round matchup with the Pats. But Pittsburgh's first road playoff game in 3 years would be a rough showing. The offense couldn't find the end zone, and the defense couldn't stop the run, or mostly Curtis Martin, as the Pats' back went for 166 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kirkland had 9 tackles, but also admitted that the Pats caught Pittsburgh off guard, made evident by a blowout loss, as Pittsburgh's season was over. And Kirkland had finished with 113 total tackles, 4 interceptions, and 4 sacks. Lloyd was back and healthy in 1997. Well, at least until mid-December. Kirkland and Brown were now Pro Bowlers. Only problem was that Brown was in Seattle now, so Jason Gilden was next man up in Pittsburgh. Not a bad replacement. And with second-year linebacker Earl Holmes joining Kirkland in the middle, things didn't look too bad. But LeBeau had also left, returning to Cincy, as Pittsburgh replaced him with Jim Haslett. And there was a gaping hole in the secondary, and Pittsburgh wasn't just going to luck into another Rod Woodson. So the Steelers had an Achilles heel, and teams attacked it. But they also didn't really have a choice, as Pittsburgh continued to roll out a dominant run defense, anchored by their now first-team All-Pro linebacker, Levon Kirkland. Kirkland set new career highs in tackles and sacks, and early in the season, he wasn't even on the field every down. But it quickly became clear that that strategy wasn't working, and with more Kirkland came more winning, as the Steelers had the league's premier inside linebacker, a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, with Pittsburgh winning 5 straight after a 1-2 start, and with a career year from Bettis, and one of the most exciting players in the league as their starting quarterback. The offense was dangerous, and a much different looking Steelers team still won 11 games, and captured their 4th straight division title. So it was back to the playoffs, and a rematch with New England, but this time, it was in Pittsburgh. This game was exactly what Pittsburgh wanted, a defensive battle, and the Steelers won the turnover battle, forcing QB Drew Bledsoe into 2 fumbles and 2 picks. Kirkland accounted for one of those interceptions, and the Pats accounted for just 6 points. The Steelers scored 7, so the Steelers were going to host Denver the following week. With a trip to the Super Bowl on the line, Kirkland was all over the field in the conference championship, racking up 9 total tackles and getting to John Elway for a sack. And Elway's second pass attempt of the game wound up in Kirkland's hands. But the Steelers fell behind by 10 going into the half. And while the Pittsburgh defense held Denver scoreless in the second, the offense managed just 7 more points. And Pittsburgh fell short again. And Kirkland wrapped up his great year with 126 total tackles, 5 sacks, and 2 interceptions. Another domino fell. Lloyd was gone. Blitzburg was officially over. But now the anchor and leader of the defense was Kirkland, and Pittsburgh made that loud and clear when they made Kirkland the NFL's highest paid linebacker. And now Kirkland's weight, according to some sources, was up to 280 pounds. So he shouldn't have been able to do things like this.
There's the block, time for Harbaugh, who gets away on the move, chased by Oldham, chased by Kirkland, and brought down at the...
But he did, spending the season chasing down ball carriers or stuffing them at the line. And his pass coverage continued to be arguably his greatest strength, unofficially being credited with 15 passes defended. And former Steelers great Jack Ham would even liken Kirkland to his teammate and another great Jack who played for Pittsburgh. And Kirkland's current teammates thought pretty highly of him as well. And the Steelers defense was still one of the best in the league. However, the offense was a different story. Stewart struggled as a passer, and the Steelers rarely found the end zone, yet they were 7-4 after 11 games, until they collapsed, scoring 2 offensive touchdowns across their final 5 games, and losing every one of them. Their reign at the top of the Central Division was over, and at 7-9, they didn't even make the playoffs, as Kirkland ended his year with 117 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. By 1999, it was clear that Pittsburgh's best years were behind them. Stewart was electric, but he wasn't the answer at quarterback. And with no passing attack, defenses could sell out to stop Bettis, as he had his worst season as a Steeler up to that point. And defensively, Pittsburgh was good, but not great. Kirkland was still a consistent and reliable defender, but was now receiving criticism about his weight and the effect it may be having on his game. But it couldn't have been that bad, with Kirkland recording his 4th consecutive season with at least 100 tackles and at least 1 interception, and his 4 forced fumbles would tie a career high, with his best game of the season coming in a Week 16 win over the Panthers, when Kirkland recorded 10 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 forced fumbles. But that win was their first in 6 weeks. Another solid start to the season had been wasted by a huge losing streak. And after giving up 47 points to Tennessee at home in the season finale, the Steelers had lost 10 games for the first time in over a decade. But Kirkland closed out another great year with 111 total tackles, 12 tackles for a loss, and 4 forced fumbles. Pittsburgh continued on with Stewart in 2000, and Bettis had a bounce-back year, but he was also force-fed the ball, with Pittsburgh again possessing one of the league's worst passing offenses. But defensively, they were back to being among the league's best. A much improved secondary and a great young linebacker in Joey Porter signaled transition within the Steelers' defensive personnel. And while Kirkland came back slimmer and once again played all 16 games, he had the worst season of his career as a starter. But he was slowed by injuries all season, recording no sacks or forced fumbles for the first time since his rookie year. But he would still manage to pick off a pass for the 5th straight season. The Steelers got out to an 0-3 start, but then on the back of their defense, they won 5 straight, now 2 games above 500. But that's as good as they'd get, going just 4-4 over the second half of the year. And while a 9-7 record was their best in a few years, it still wasn't enough for the playoffs. And Kirkland's season had ended with him racking up 86 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 1 interception. Pittsburgh was moving forward into a new era, and while Kirkland was still effective, the Steelers no longer felt he was worth the massive contract they gave him, choosing to release their man in the middle after 9 seasons. But Kirkland wasn't without a home for long, signing a deal with the Seattle Seahawks, where he would be reunited with Chad Brown, and along with Anthony Simmons, the 3 would form one of the league's better linebacking trios. And Kirkland had a good year as a run stopper, finishing 3rd on the team with 101 tackles and forcing a pair of fumbles. But it was a bit of an adjustment, as Kirkland spent his whole career in a 3-4 defense, and now was the lone interior linebacker in the 4-3 scheme that Mike Holmgren and Seattle ran. And while he was known for his mobility, at 32 years old, he didn't move like he used to, as Seattle boasted an average defense and below average pass defense. And with a young offense that was still developing, they would start slow and never fully recover, finishing with a respectable 9-7 record, but still not doing enough for a playoff spot, as Kirkland's first year in Seattle had seen him record 101 tackles, 1 sack, and 2 forced fumbles. Kirkland's weight had ballooned, reportedly reaching as high as 308 pounds in 2001. The Seahawks had asked him to drop weight before training camp, and when that didn't happen, they would cut Kirkland loose after just 1 season, but he would soon be back in Pennsylvania, this time in an Eagles uniform, earning the starting spot on an Eagles team that was a legitimate contender, featuring a top 5 offense and a top 2 defense. And Kirkland again played all 16 games, recording his lowest tackle total since his rookie year, but still acting as a good run stopper, and ending the regular season on a high note with 2 forced fumbles in a Week 17 loss to New York, which broke a 6-game Eagles win streak. However, at 12-4, they tied for the league's best record and won the NFC East, then would easily take care of the Falcons in the divisional. But in the conference championship, the Eagles and their 4th-ranked offense ran into Tampa Bay and their top-ranked defense, and Kirkland saw another season end just short of a Super Bowl appearance, with the linebacker wrapping up his year in Philly with 76 total tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. But with 11 years of NFL football to his name and a selection to the 1990s All-Decade team, Levon Kirkland decided that was enough, choosing to walk away from the NFL prior to the 03 season, having never missed a single game in his career, returning to Clemson to complete his degree before he would pursue a second career in coaching, even spending some time with the Arizona Cardinals, then taking a vice president of development position with the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame. Levon Kirkland may not be your usual freak of nature type player, but that doesn't mean he wasn't. His combination of size and speed was quite unique, and when you add in his skill and durability, it's no surprise that he became as valuable as he did on one of the NFL's most exciting defenses ever. No matter where you wanted him to play or what you needed him to do, Levon Kirkland would do it, no questions and no complaints. An all-pro linebacker who still probably didn't get the recognition he should have. Without him, all those great Steelers linebackers of the 90s wouldn't have put up the sack numbers that they did. It's just a shame that they have no rings to show for it. But they tried, and Kirkland had a knack for showing up in the big games. And a 300-pound inside linebacker? That's something you'll never see again. But that's it for today's episode on Levon Kirkland. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Steelers teammates, or this one on one of his Seahawks teammates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.